In this video, I'll be going over drum and bass from complete scratch in FL Studio 24, ideally super beginner friendly, so you should be able to follow along with this at really any skill level, and hopefully learn quite a bit. So we're not going to waste any time, let's go ahead and jump into it here. The way I'm going to start this track today is with some chords. So I've got a plugin here called Analog Lab, and I'm going to use this just to kind of give us like a nice starting synth while I write down some chords, and I'll explain my process behind that. We have a sound that's a little bit like this. And what I'm going to do to start off is write down our chords just like with my mouse in piano roll, and I'm going to explain how I do that, then I'm actually going to go over and record them with a piano, and I'll explain why I do that after. But first, we're going to get our chords down like I said. So the way I do this, and the way that makes the most sense to me, especially if you're a beginner, I like to start with a bass line, so we're going to put down a note here. And this part, where I write down the bass line, this is something that you sort of get a feel for the longer you've been doing this. I kind of do this part by ear. And I like to turn on my metronomes, that way you could hear it in time with everything at DNB tempo. So I'm thinking something like this. Like this. But from here I'm going to show you how to turn really any bass line you come up with into a chord progression. I've explained this in a couple of my other videos, but the general idea behind it is copy and paste your bass. I like to throw it an octave up, so here for example. And from here we're going to copy and paste once again, and just sort of do a little bit of simple counting to create major chords. So paste it once again, and we're going to move up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, like so. At this point we're going to copy and paste once more, and move up a remaining 3. So 1, 2, 3. What this has done is given you major chords. And the way I go about it from here is I'll hit play, and this is a part that I also do by ear. I'll listen for whichever chord in this progression doesn't sound right, if any, and if something's off, I'll typically change it to a minor chord. So listen to this. This is the chord that I think stuck out to me. You notice it's a little tense and weird sounding. And if you want to change that from a major chord to a minor one, take your middle note from here and just pull it down 1. Now you should notice this chord progression will sound good. That's a general way to do it nice and easy for simple chord progressions like this. And from here, what I'm going to go ahead and do before I mess with the progression anymore and make it more complex, I'm going to record it in with my piano. So now we've just recorded some with the piano here. You'll notice the reason I did this, if you look at the bottom where velocity is, which is basically how hard the notes are hitting, if you do this like digitally, just drawing it in, everything is the exact same unless you try to randomize it yourself. But I've always found the most natural result is if you have the means of like a MIDI keyboard and you could go record this in. So now it sounds like this. Pretty good, and now we could start messing with things like inversions to try to make the progression sound a little bit different. So if you're following along and you have your own chord progression, the way you could make it a little more complex from here is taking certain notes and say putting them up or down an octave, and you'll notice this will give you like a different feel for that chord. So instead of this, for example, you could have this. That's pretty nice. I'm going to mess with this a little bit and see what we come up with. I like that, I'm happy with that, and now that we have a chord progression down that we're going to use, this is where we could start adding different sounds. So my goal here to start off is kind of make like a drop section, and what I'm going to do right now is basically build out a bed of chords that are going to support our lead and our bass, things like that. Right now we have the electric piano. I think I'm going to combine this with like an organ sound as well as some saws to just fill out a lot of space and make this really intense. So there's our organ. Now we're going to add the saws. So when you load up Serum, it's going to sound like this initially if we drag this in. Obviously that's a bit harsh, we don't want it to be just like that. So let's tweak it a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and throw in a bass, and once that's there, we're going to have a nice thing ready for a lead melody. So I'm going to add a new instance of Serum, and if we go into our piano roll, you can actually see the root notes of our chord progression. These are basically going to be our bass, and we could just go ahead and make differences from there to make it a little better to listen to. So we're just going to copy those in for now, and you'll notice this will sound right. And that's where we can go ahead and add our variation. So what I'm going to do, I actually kind of want a saw wave as our bass in a way, but a little bit different. I'm going to add some white noise to the sound, going to make this a pure sine just for controlling the sub, and on oscillator B we're just going to add another saw wave, but I'm going to remove the fundamental because that sine wave already exists in oscillator A. That's just a cool thing you could do in Serum. So right now this is going to sound like this. We're going to go to effects and add some distortion to crush the noise in the saw together. And move the phase a bit because it's going to change how that sounds going into that distortion. Something like that is really nice and kind of exactly what I envisioned. That's sounding pretty nice. This now has a lot of space and is open and ready for a lead sound. And you see, that came together really quickly. That doesn't take too long at all. So first off, we're just going to open up Serum again. I have a preset that I quite like that is basically a square wave with some multiband compression, a lot of reverb, and it just sounds quite nice as like a good space filler. We're going to try that out for now. And here I've actually got this connected, so if I turn back on my piano, I can listen to this chord progression and kind of freestyle a melody over it. That's the best way I've found to get catchy melodies. It's really easy if you're like, say, a piano player like I am. But if you're not, you could do the same thing here, just drawing in piano roll. And if you do it on the same pattern, like this is set up right here, there's a reason I haven't like moved these across yet, you could see the chords. And this is really helpful if you're more of a beginner who like maybe doesn't know how to pick the notes that are like correctly in key. Basically, anything that you see that's being used in your chords is technically right, and you can go from there. There's going to be extra notes too that aren't shown here, but it's a good starting point because I think typically if you have like a starting good few notes, it's a lot easier to kind of hear where the melody should go. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my piano again and sort of freestyle a melody over this, and when we get something that I think is promising, we'll go ahead and write it in. See, if there's something in there already, it just kind of fits nicely. We'll pick something out of that and throw it in as a melody. So I just went and recorded that into the piano roll, then like fixed it up because obviously I'm not going to play it perfectly, and this sort of thing, you want it to be a little bit like precise in terms of how it is. You could have some like variation, cool things like that, but I ended up putting together this melody. Obviously it's not mixed yet, so it's a little bit hard for that melody to shine through, but things are ready now, so I'm going to go ahead and move all of these to their own pattern for organization and start structuring together a drop. We have everything ready here. Gonna add some effects to this lead a little bit, just like some simple EQ. Get rid of some of the highs, tame it just a little bit, and I think it wants to be a little louder. Something like that. So now obviously we need drums for a drop here, and the way I like to start this, I'm going to explain a little bit about sidechaining and how to make that work in your track, because that's something super important to learn. But first off, we're going to find a kick drum. So anything could really do here. I'm sort of thinking something that sounds maybe like this. Simple one like that. That kick I think is a little long though. This is something that you'll get a feel for what it needs to be for your track. And the good thing about this kick sample is it's not too short, because if it's too short, it's a bit difficult to make it longer, but it's very easy to make it shorter. Just trim it like this, do a bit of a fade. So if you don't know what sidechaining is, try to pay attention to what happens when this kick plays here. You might notice a bit of distortion. And if we turn it up just to exaggerate, there you go. You could really hear like the distortion. It's not too bad on its own normally, but sidechain basically aims to fix this, and it makes your kick and your snare, if you do it to that too, stand out a lot more in your mix, because sidechain is basically ducking everything as far as you want. Like you could duck it to complete silence just for a little bit when this thing happens. And I'll show you how we've set that up. So here I have my kick in the two places I want it to play for this bar, which is our usual drum and bass pattern. And you notice up here I have two little triggers, one for kick and snare. What these samples are, if we zoom in, they're just kick samples that are made unique, meaning like if you duplicate it, it's a different version that could go to a different mixer. I make it as short as it could be, I throw that on mixer channel 1, And on mixer 1, I've unlinked it from the master. So by default, it's like this, meaning you'd hear it. You don't want to hear your sidechain trigger. It's just something that exists to basically be data. So you press this to unlink it. Now, I'm going to make a new mixer, and this is just going to be called like SC or something for sidechain. And I'm going to move everything that I want sidechained onto this. This is a quick way to basically just use one instance of a plugin rather than several. I wouldn't recommend that for a final mix, but just to get an idea down, it's completely fine. So I'm just routing everything to that track only, meaning it's only playing out of here, it's not going to play twice. So on that sidechain mixer now, you're going to add your sidechain plugin. Now, as a tutorial here, something that's included in FL Studio, open up Fruity Limiter on here. This is great because you could set this up for completely free. You don't need to buy any plugins. This is not what I use, but the thing I use does cost money, so if you're just looking for something built in, you could do it here. And what you want to do is go to the compression tab, and then on your mixer, you want to point the kick sidechain trigger mixer to that as well. Right-click on the arrow, and a button will come up that'll say sidechain to this track. We're going to do that. And then back on Fruity Limiter, it will pop up here under sidechain. Turn your threshold all the way to 0, and then I like to mess with near ratio. It doesn't have to be exactly what I use. And you're basically going to use the release knob to control the amount of sidechain. So listen here. That's way too much, but that gives you a great example of what sidechain does. See how everything's ducking when that kick hits. So we're just going to lower the amount until it sounds good, where like you kind of don't notice it, but it's just there to serve like a technical purpose of getting rid of distortion. I like to loop the section that I've put there, so you'll just hear this a couple times. Something like that is good. Now we can go ahead and build out the rest of our drums, and they won't distort and sound too terrible with everything. So we're going to grab a snare now too, very important part. Might use this one, it's a good snare. Put that where it needs to be. And we're also going to grab a tops loop to just fill out like the cymbals portion. With our drums kind of in place here, we have enough to basically be a skeleton of a drop. Like you'll see everything's kind of here, and it's just a lot of polish from this section. So now that that's set up, there's a reason I start with the drop first, because I think once you have a drop in place, it's really easy to sort of get the elements together for the rest of your track. For example, we're going to want like an intro, and what I'm going to do for that is pull our chords from one of these layers right here, and put down a new instance of really any VST. I'm going to use Serum again. You could be using Vital, by the way, I did forget to mention this. Vital is a great alternative to Serum that's completely free. So if you are a beginner, and you don't want to pay for Serum, you could go ahead and get Vital. The reason I use Serum over it is just because I've been using Serum for a lot of years, so I'm like more comfortable with the UI, but it's completely capable. It can do all the same things, and that's really nice. So what I'm going to do from here is basically put together a quick little 8th C pluck, just to set the vibe for our intro. So I just made it sound like this. Just a simple saw patch again with some reverb. And on the second repetition of all this, we're going to put a version of our lead sound. It's not going to be this one because too loud, obviously. But we're going to copy the MIDI off of that and use like a simplified version of the same sound to foreshadow what it's going to come into in the drop. This is a super important thing that I definitely advise you kind of learn here, because you don't want your drop to be too unexpected. If we reveal that melody kind of in advance, the listener is going to be expecting it and it's less of a jump. And I think that's important. So we're going to put together something a little bit like this. There's like a little whistle sign thing, and if we listen to that over top it. Now we'd have like risers here to signify that the drop's coming, and then it would go to this. That makes it work a lot better, and it will sound even better once we add like drum roll, stuff like that. But what I'm going to do, I just heard a little idea for variation. We're going to duplicate the drop, and on the second repetition of that, I'm going to play this lead sound an octave down. Should sound good. Yeah, I like that. And then that could transition to a B section, which would probably just strip some elements from this. So for example, get rid of the lead, just have the bass and the chords, have something like this. We got our drop kind of set here for now. Let's go ahead and work on the intro and build up just a little bit to make that a little more fleshed out. So I'm going to get a snare roll, This is good for build-up, something like this. You'll hear immediately what that's doing. Adding that, turn it down quite a bit. I'm also going to add a regular piano here for the intro. Now, if you're using FL by default and you don't have like a third-party plugin for this, there's a great one built in. I've talked about this before. If you go to your packs folder, under Instruments and Keyboard, I really like either Stage Grand or Close Grand. I think for this one I'm going to use Close. So we're going to drag that onto the pattern screen here. It's a great piano. Now we also need a riser because this is meant to be our build-up, so I'm going to grab a few of those and probably mix them in. I like to keep them quiet because they could get really chaotic and sort of annoying in a way if they're too loud. So get a couple of these. I'm actually going to cut the risers there. Little detail work like this is super important. You see, if we listen to this again, the risers sort of feel weird if they continue on that last bit over the snare, so we're going to cut them. Same with the new chords we just added. That's better. Now, another detail you might have noticed, this drop doesn't have enough impact compared to the energy of the build-up because it's missing a crash cymbal. It's that simple, honestly. We're just going to grab one from here. You'll notice, let me compare with and without here. So, with it, without it, it just needs that little burst of white noise. You don't want it to be too overpowering, but it's nice. Alright, so far in this video, we put together a small little intro and build-up, and then we've realized our drop and B section. I think that's good progress. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a part 2 where we continue from here, because obviously this is a very quickly thrown together idea. And if I were to continue further, I'd take a lot of time doing more intricate detail work, so that way nothing's really too rushed, and the idea really gets to like flourish in a way. Let me know if you want to see that in the comments below. But I'm going to go ahead and play what we have here and wrap up this video. Thank you for watching, drop a like if it helped you out, and subscribe for future music production videos from me. I do upload quite a lot of tutorials you might find helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.